So, welcome. Today we're talking about Tantra and the dating world. Because it's very interesting, like, as much as Tantra isn't directly about sex and intimacy and relationships, when we bring Tantra into that, we actually get to have the deep experiences that we actually desire. And so there is such a thing as tantric sex and tantric intimacy and tantric relationships. So, how do we do that today in the dating world? Especially in the world of dating apps. Because very often, if you're just meeting someone or if you meet a friend of a friend or something like that, it's easier. It's more organic. You sort of rub up against each other a few times and then maybe you realize, wow, there's some real interest here. And it moves slower. It moves more at the speed of human speed. But in today's day, we have online dating apps. We have Tantra events, maybe that you might attend, and maybe you're going to meet someone. So, how does Tantra work in that kind of scenario? Because a lot of people who study Tantra, especially for this reason, they're single, they're seeking, or maybe they're not single yet, but one day they would like to have a relationship that's different and deeper and, you know, goes into places that maybe we haven't gone before and we haven't gone in decades. So it's interesting to imagine how we integrate tantra into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a series of questions that people ask me all the time. And the first question is, how do you introduce tantra to someone new? Because, right? I mean, you're on your first date and they're like, so what are you looking for? It's a great question. And I mean, most of the time they're just asking, are you looking for something short and sweet, or are you looking for long term or something like that? But for me, especially when I was dating, so just personal history, I was married for 20 years. And then in my mid 40s, I got divorced and I was single for a while. And I definitely played in the dating world. And I even wrote a book about it called Tales of the Tinderverse, which is my journey in the online dating world, specifically on Tinder, because I liked Tinder, even though I know it's considered a hookup thing, seemingly the opposite of anything tantric. But I liked it because it was efficient. I liked the idea that I could almost intuitively say yes, no, yes, no. And I had a lot of fun and I met a lot of great people there. So, how do you introduce this? Well, the first question you have to ask is, what is Tantra to you? What does that mean? Like, what we have to have a good sense of what Tantra is for us before we're going to share it with anyone anyway. So, if we're not really sure, then we can't really share it. Like, that's the bottom line. So, what would I say, right? Because I was definitely seeking tantric experiences out in the world. I didn't actually ever, well, in the beginning I did. When I first went on the dating apps, I was like looking for a tantric partner and I'm a tantra teacher and I would say all these things. Well, that attracted some crazy attention. That I got so many people, oh, you can practice on me and I want to know that and da da da. And then in the beginning I was really naive and people would the guys would be like, well, can you explain to me what a tantric experience is? And I'd go into all this detail in text, like in messages. And then truthfully, the second time they would message me, they'd be like, hey, can you explain that again? And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, just sort of go through it for me again. And then eventually I woke up to the fact that I was now um, what do you call it? Free phone sex. They were just sitting there enjoying my story. And so I slowly got a little smarter about sharing my own tantric experience or who I was and all that. And instead, I would sit with people and say, well, I am interested in having a tantric experience or a tantric relationship or whatever. And they would say, well, what does that mean? That's the first question they say. Well, what does that mean? And I'd say, well, Tantra is about expansion. And so, whatever we experience together, I'm not really looking for kind of the run of the mill relationship. I'm looking to get together so that we can explore something deeper, something different, something more expansive, a truly intimate connection that we need to be able to connect emotionally and in deep spaces. And I would talk about how Tantra is a spiritual journey. That whatever you believe, that spirituality is a part of it. And so even us being together, there's something more going on. We're not just animals, going at it. There's something deeper. Well, most of the time, guys would just be staring at me like, wow, I'm not sure this witch is worth it. There's a lot of that. But, or they were like, oh my God, like, because it's not what they want. They don't want deep emotional connection. They're not interested in expansion. And that's cool, right? That's important. I'm not asking them to sign up for a cult or do weird stuff. I'm just saying, are you interested in true connection? Are you interested in opening yourselves? Are you interested in vulnerability? Are you interested in expanding and exploring and, making intimacy an adventure? Are you interested in that? Yes or no? And you could normally tell because if they kind of like, then they're not there. They're not interested. Cool. There's someone else out there for them. you know, Best to keep on going. Another big thing to do is, especially if you're on a dating app, I personally had a limit that I would message back and forth maybe 4 or 5 times, just little chit chat. And then we meet. I don't want to have any kind of relationship with you on the dating app. First of all, I don't even know if you're real. I don't know if you are pretending to be something you're not. I don't know if you're a bot. I have no idea what you are. I remember when I was traveling in 2018, I gave everything away and I was traveling for quite some time. And so I was working remotely. I had my online courses and I had things I did, but I was always, you're always looking for another little side hustle that you can do on the road. And one of the most common side hustles for digital nomads is to work for dating apps, being people on there and engaging people in conversation, right? You're actually a fake profile hired by the dating app to engage with people. And that's a thing. That is a real job that people do. So if I'm on a dating app, you've got me in a back and forth for maybe 4 to 5 times. And if by that time you have not asked to meet me yet, I'm probably not going to even respond to anything. Or I will say, if you want to meet, let's set up a time. Oh, I'm not sure. I'm really busy. Okay, bye. And I unmatch them. Like it's not a thing. Like I don't play around. That's why things like Tinder and stuff were fine for me because I don't play there, right? If you really want to meet, awesome. And then sometimes people would be like, well, what do you want to do? And that I'm like, it doesn't matter. We're not having a date. The first time we meet is not a date. I don't know anything about you. The first time we meet is a meeting. And I would actually tell people, and sometimes guys would get mad, but I would say, there's a 90% chance that we're not interested. There's a very, very high chance that we are not compatible. And the number of guys would be like, well, that's really negative. And I was like, no, it's not negative. If you line up 100 people down the street, how many of them do you actually want to be friends with? One, intimate with? What percentage is that? And I said, we haven't even met yet. We don't even know what we smell like. And when I say smell, I mean, it's like you get close to someone and it's almost like your auras either mix or they don't, or you always keep a bit of a distance. And you can see yourself do this in life with people. There's people you lean back from and there's people you lean forward into. So until you actually meet and actually lay eyes on this person, you have no idea if they're even someone you'd want to be friends with, let alone be intimate with. And it has very little to do with what they look like or whether they're tall or short or what their bodies look like or anything like that. It's a feel. And the other big part is if you want to have like tantric intimacy, and tantric intimacy, first of all, there has to be a connection. There has to be a loving connection. There also has to be magnetism. There has to be that positive, negative, masculine, feminine, and this is all gender, orientations and stuff. But there has to be magnetism between you. How can you ever know if there's magnetism until you meet? Right? Maybe you meet someone and they're a very nice person and they're attractive and they're great. They tick all the boxes, but they kind of feel like your brother or they're your sister or something. You're like, you're great, but there's no spark. And that's it. There's no spark. But you don't know that until you meet. Maybe you meet and the person can't keep eye contact, right? So I would be dating. I would always, especially when I lived in Toronto, I would meet them at the Starbucks on the corner, and I would sit there and I'd be like looking at them and listening to them and talking to them, and really looking at them. And the number of guys who were like, wow, you really you really are into eye contact, eh? And I was like, well, where else do you want me to look? Like, I don't understand. And that was always a big sign, right? That if someone can't look at me, they're probably not ready for the level of intimacy or the kind of connection I'm seeking, right? When you meet someone, how easy is the conversation? Are they interesting people? Do you want to hear more about them? Do you want to ask them questions? I remember one time I went on a date with a guy and we were sitting there and I actually wasn't interested in him. How he had presented himself on the dating app was not how he actually was, because that's a big thing too. A lot of people put pictures on there of themselves, back when they were working out or even sometimes when they were quite a bit younger. And then you meet them. I had one guy, not this guy, but I had another guy. I literally walked into the Starbucks and I looked around and I couldn't find the guy that was in on the app. And finally there was this dude waving at me and he was like, "Hey, hey." And I'm like, "What?" Because he was I had no idea who it was. And finally he said, "Oh, I'm so and so. We're here to meet for the date." And I was like, "You don't look anything like your pictures." And he said, "Oh yeah, they were from a little while ago, but at least now we're meeting." And I was like, "No way." And that was I just walked out. So, you kind of have to know anyway. And that's what happened with this guy that I want to tell you the story about. He didn't look anything like his pictures, like nothing. And I wasn't attracted to him. I was like, no, I this is dumb. But then I thought, nah, whatever. I'll sit down and we'll have a chit chat. And we're talking and talking and talking. And all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I'm really tired. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go home. I look at my phone. It was midnight. We'd been talking for 6 hours. And I thought, wow, we talked for 6 hours? That's crazy. And then he said, you know, do you want to see me again? And I was like, sure. Okay. Because I was so shocked that we had such an easy flow together. It was so curious. But you don't know that until you actually meet. So that was one of my number one rules when I was dating is the first date is just a meeting. There's nothing else to it. From there, you can suss out whether or not you want to have an actual date, you know. Sometimes people say they meet someone and their partner says, well, I'm not interested in Tantra. I'm not into that stuff. So then you have to have a real conversation about what they believe Tantra is. Because there's a lot of people who are in Tantra communities and stuff who, for them, Tantra is rituals. That if you want to be intimate with them, then, you're going to be sitting cross-legged, you're going to go through all these different rituals and stuff. And that is a path. I'm not familiar with it at all. But you have to be sure, like, okay, what exactly do you mean by Tantra, right? Because if they have an idea that that's what Tantra is, but that isn't what it is for you, then you just get to explain that, right? But if they're like, yeah, I'm not into that Tantra stuff, and you say, well, for me, Tantra is just a deep emotional connection, it's a soul connection, it's bringing spirit, God, consciousness into lovemaking. That's, you're not into that. And if they say no, wow, how good is that to know? Right? That's awesome. Seeking tantric intimacy is never about bending someone into your world. The worst thing you can do is try to convince someone or school someone into this. They either have the natural desire for it, like when you talk about it, even if they know nothing about Tantra, if you talk about it and you see their eyes lighting up saying, wow, I don't know anything about this, but this is just what I've been looking for. You're good, because then you have a fellow adventurer, right? You have, even if you don't have a billion years of experience, maybe you've read my book, Tantric Intimacy, and you're like, you know what? I really want to try section 4 with someone. That's what I really want. And you say to them, well, actually, I've read this book, or there's all these videos and stuff, and I'd love to watch them with you and explore this with you. And they're like, awesome, I'm all in. That's all you have to know. The number one way to share Tantra with someone, though, is to be Tantric, right? The number one question people ask me if they want to study Tantra is, do I need to have a partner? I don't have a partner to study Tantra with. But Tantra is not about having a partner. I mean, this talk that we're doing is about Tantra in the dating world, right? So this is about finding a partner. But Tantra is predominantly a solo journey. It's about actually being tantric. And what does that mean? At its foundation, Tantra says this is about living as a fully divine and physical being here on earth. That's a personal journey. So the question is, do you live like that? In AA, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about being an atheist. There's one whole section about being an atheist. And they say many people say that they believe in God, but they live as though they don't. And this is a very interesting question. And whether you like the God word or not, you can replace that with whatever you want. It's just a word. But do you live like that? This is the path of Tantra. Do you actually close your eyes and ask for guidance? Do you live according to that guidance? Do you believe that there is something greater going on in the world? Do you believe that you are a microcosm of the macrocosm of the world? Do you live that way? Do you have faith in your inspiration, and do you manifest that in the world? Do you live in this way? Well, if you live in this way, when you're sitting in front of a potential partner, a potential date, that's who they're meeting. And you will very quickly find out if they even could be tantric, or are they very contracted, or are they very ungrounded. Just because someone's into spirituality doesn't mean they're tantric. Tantric is a grounded experience. This is where spirituality goes to work. Spirituality enters a difficult conversation with someone. This is in parenting. This is everything. This is life. And if you live that way, then that's the only kind of conversation you can have with people. And they're either going to be able to flow with it or not. And so you actually become the greatest filter here. Part of the being tantric is this beautiful blending of the masculine and feminine. And this is, of course, I feel like I'm just picking up books left and right here, but this is why this is such a passion for me, right? The divine union of the masculine and feminine. Do you live like this within yourself, right? Do you have a balanced masculine and feminine? Do you give to yourself? Are you able to receive? Do you manifest your inspiration? Do you have a strong protector so that you can be vulnerable and true about life? But even more importantly than that, When you are fully balanced in your masculine and feminine, you are whole and you don't need a partner. The other person doesn't need to be anything. They don't need to pursue you or not. They don't need to accept your pursuit or not. You're happy. You're happy with or without them. And this sounds maybe cold, but there is such a freedom in dating when the other person doesn't have to be anything for you because you're already happy. And then you'll also be able to tell, is this person happy unto themselves? Do they actually have a full life? Are they interested in life? Are they expanding in their own life? Or are you their next expansion? Right? Are they actually bored and lonely and you have to fulfill that for them? Because this will not turn out tantrically. This will turn into codependence very quickly, right? So it's a very interesting thing that within ourselves, when we are completely balanced, masculine and feminine, and we are whole, we'll be able to recognize someone else also who is whole, right? And if we're all on a journey. We don't have to be perfect coming into dating, but at least we have to be trying, right? We have to be aware of that. So, of course, with this polarity, when we are whole, we also can recognize when someone else is in the polarity that we desire. This is the magnetism. So, for me personally, in relationship, I love being in the feminine. That's what I want to explore. I want my yin yang symbol to be expanded and to create something bigger with someone else. Well, that means that I want to find someone who is naturally masculine. And again, this isn't gendered. If you are in same-sex couples, then maybe you love being in the masculine or the feminine. But the question is, which do you love to be in? Because, for example, if I love to be in the feminine, then I am not going to message you first on a dating app because I am only seeking someone who is a natural masculine, someone who wouldn't imagine waiting for someone to message them. And I get it. I understand that, I'm heterosexual, so men out there, they get blown off a lot. There's a lot more men seeking dates perhaps than women, or at least it seems like that. And so maybe they're a little gun shy and they don't want to keep being rejected or whatever, or ignored or ghosted. And that's okay. For me out there in the dating world, that's fine because I am only seeking someone who in this moment is in that healthy masculine and desires the pursuit and desires to be in the masculine. And it's an amazing thing because they're out there. Similarly, if you want to be in the masculine, then make sure you're the one messaging. And the thing is, whether or not somebody responds or not, or whatever, because again, on dating apps, like when I was in Toronto, when I would go on Tinder, there's millions of people there, especially on things like Plenty of Fish. That's why I use Tinder, because it limits how many men could message me at a time. Because something like Plenty of Fish, I don't know what it is now, but back when I was on it, you would just go on and it was almost like, here are the new profiles. And within 5 minutes, you would have 40 people messaging you. Like there's no way I could respond to 40 people, and then half an hour later, there were 40 more people. So the fact even that you may not be responded to isn't personal. They might have just been lambasted with messages. And this is what happened to me when I moved to Toronto. I went on Tinder and I was like, oh, look at this. Because I was moving from this tiny little town where you have to put your thing to 100 kilometers to get anyone at all, to even get anyone to swipe on. Of course, they're not swiping on you because they live in a city, so they don't have theirs out to 100 kilometers. And suddenly I'm downtown Toronto. I can put my perimeter to 5 kilometers and I've got a million people. I'm playing like, oh yeah, match, or swipe, swipe, swipe. And all of a sudden I've got like 10 people messaging me right away. And I'm like, I can't message all these people back and I can't maintain the conversations because I work. Like it's too much conversation, right? And so If you prefer to be in the masculine polarity, then keep messaging. It's almost like you're just building the muscle. You're just exercising the masculine energy in you. Whether or not it's picked up or not isn't the point. You're just exercising the masculine muscle, right? And the right person will show up, right? We have to have some faith here, right? If you desire to be in the masculine, message first and carry the conversation for a while, right? It's not just, hey, like if somebody messages first and they say, hey, I unmatch them. That's just me. No one has to be like me. That's just me. I unmatch them because that's not masculine, right? Is that you're going to go, hey, so then I go, hey, and then you go, how's it going? It's like, okay, you know what? This isn't a thing. We're not going to keep going here. But it's a very interesting thing, especially if you want to play in this polarity fun, because to me, that's like the most exciting part. Because when you play in the polarity and you actually allow this dance of the masculine and feminine, you actually allow these to flow into each other in this beautiful spiral. Then it spirals and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's when you get to experience amazing things. This is why I never want to initiate as the feminine. Because most of the time, if I initiate as the feminine, the relationship will stay that way. I'll always be the one planning the dates. I'll always be the one initiating. I'll always be that one. And I'll actually end up in the masculine. But sometimes what people in the feminine who want to be in the feminine do is, well, if the person we like doesn't initiate, we'll initiate. And what we want to do deep down is a bit of a bait and switch. That I'm going to initiate for a little while so that you feel good about it. But then I want you to take over in the masculine. But that doesn't happen. Not normally. On occasion it happens. But like I had one partner who this is what happened. We went on a date. He actually did, he initiated and all that. We went on a date and then he kind of disappeared. Or he would message me and say, how's it going? I'd say, good. I'd say, how are you? Kind of tired. I would be like, what? Like, this is the mating dance? I'm kind of tired. Like, what? So of course I would just stop the conversation. I wouldn't continue because there was no conversation. And I wasn't quite sure why he hadn't asked me out on another date. Right? I mean, he was just sort of these kind of tired chats after work. So I wasn't really responding. And then eventually he messaged me and he says, why are you not talking to me? And I said, well, it's not that I'm not talking to you. I'm really seeking someone who loves being in the masculine and you haven't asked me out again. So I don't want to make you into something you're not. I'm sure there's lots of women out there that'll be more than happy to make all the dates and be in the masculine. It's not me. So why? So we're obviously not a good match. So he got all upset and he's like, oh, well, fine. Then I'll be in the, I'll take you out for dinner or something. Right. And then we went out for dinner and I explained the masculine and feminine to him, what that meant. And he says, oh, well, okay. Yeah. All right. I can do all that. And he did for quite a while. He was all in the masculine. He was initiating, he was planning dates. He was, bringing me, flowers. He was doing all kinds of fun stuff. And I was like, wow, this is great. Then after about 6 months, he became himself again. Passive. That wasn't his nature. He was doing it because he knew that's what I wanted, but it wasn't his nature. And so in the end, I started realizing, I really want it in someone who it's their nature, that they don't have to feel like they have to do something different. They don't have to become someone for me. I want them to get to be themselves. It just means we're not compatible, right? It's not a character flaw. It's just that we're not compatible. And that's totally cool, right? We have this weird idea that we're supposed to, I think it's a scarcity mentality when we're dating, that I need to make everybody like me. And then if you don't like Tantra, well, I'll make you like Tantra. And it's like, why? Why not wait and see who else is out there? So let's say you find someone, you've met, you've matched, and it's time to be intimate, and you want to have tantric intimacy with them. What does that look like? If you know nothing at all, the number one thing is all we do is slow down. And you just hang out together. And it's almost like one of my favorite things to do. And to this day, like this isn't just like on a first date or something. To this day, to actually just lie with your lover and touch them as if you've never touched another human before. Just like, oh, human skin. It's like if you ever have seen the scene in the movie City of Angels, where what's his name? I can't think what his name is. Nicolas Cage. He plays an angel who falls and becomes human. So he's never experienced touch before because he's in love with this doctor played by Meg Ryan. And so he decides, sorry, I'm not going to like give the whole movie away if you've never seen it, but he wants so desperately to be with her, he becomes human. And there's this amazing sex scene they're in Lake Tahoe in front of a great fire, and he is experiencing touch for the first time. It is the most tantric scene, I don't know, that Hollywood's ever put out. And you can feel him like this feeling of touch, right? Taking nothing for granted because he's never experienced it. This is so inspiring to slow down to that speed, whether you're the one receiving the touch or the one touching, to actually be like, wow. Because there's this time where he's touching her, there's a time when she's touching him, and it is absolutely epic. So if all you do is slow down, it's like this electrical system that our nerves are, like even without even getting spiritual about it, these nerves are so sensitive if we slow down. If you imagine that these nerves and these electrical currents start to bridge the gap together, you start to share the energy, you start to share the sensation. And soon, the lines start to blur between giver and receiver. As you're touching, this is it. Like you're not even doing weird, funky, weird sexual stuff. You're just touching. All of a sudden, you can start to feel what the receiver is feeling. And the receiver can feel the pleasure of the giver. And all you're doing is touching. You might just be giving a gentle massage. You might just be holding hands and playing with their fingers or their skin. And crazy things will happen. Barry Long, a great Tantra teacher, wrote a book called Making Love. I think that's what it was called. And he talked about that. He says, all you have to do is get the minds out of the way, leave the minds out there, and let the bodies make love. The bodies know what to do. And then, especially if you're being intimate with someone who has a vajra, a penis, a lingam, play with non-ejaculation. Just imagine looking at each other and saying, what if we didn't chase the ejaculation? What if that wasn't the goal? Whether you do it at the end or not, it doesn't matter. It's so small compared to the rest of the experience. And I really mean that. But to imagine, what if we didn't? To just let that go. And the first thing that happens is it's possible that the person's like, and it could be either person, the person with the vajra, the feminine partner, it doesn't matter, but both might be actually attached to that happening. But if you actually sat there and said, wow, that really bothers me, the idea of non-ejaculating. It's like, really? Why? And I've had men say to me, well, why would I even bother having sex then? And it's like, that is a good question. Why would you bother having sex with this person you love and cherish? Why would you want to be naked with them if you didn't get to ejaculate? Right? These are really important questions. If your desire is to go beyond the physical and actually explore tantric intimacy. Because if the only reason they're there is to ejaculate, well, they could have done that on their own. So what is it that they need you for? Right? Is it just more titillation? Is it just live porn? What is it? And we'll tell ourselves, oh, it's because I love you and I'm attracted to you. It's like, yeah, but you wouldn't do this if you didn't get to ejaculate at the end? Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like, yeah, but what if it wasn't there? Because the important thing is that goal in our mind shapes the whole experience. There's nothing wrong with ejaculating, but there's something wrong when it has to happen. And if by deleting it, somehow I no longer want to make love, that's the question, right? Because as soon as that's deleted, suddenly you're faced with these two bodies, right? You're faced with these two beings who have all this magnetism and joy, and suddenly you're looking at each other going, well, what else is there? And then all of a sudden you start to again notice the sensation of skin. You start to notice kissing again. You start to make out. You start to, fool around. You start to explore other things. But the second thing is, again, and this is whether there's a Vajra involved or not, to not chase the orgasm either. Because again, this creates a goal. This creates something that, oh, I have to achieve this. And now all of this performance anxiety is on the table for the masculine and the feminine person. So the crazy thing is, when you get rid of the race to the orgasm or the race to the ejaculation, because these two things are different, all of a sudden the playing field opens. It just changes. And I highly recommend, if you're ever playing, whether you have a partner right now or you're dating and you have a new partner or someone, just say, just for now, do you want to just fool around and not head for the orgasm or the ejaculation? Again, whether you choose to do it at the end, that's cool. I mean, lots of people consider it not even over. They wouldn't even know when to end if that didn't happen. By the way, when you would end is when you're going to make love for hours. But if you're only going to make love, or if you're just going to have sex for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, well, then whatever, right? You just kind of up and down and it's over, right? But if you're actually going to make love for hours, if you're going to spend an afternoon in bed with your lover, the sexual energy flows like a sine wave. It's very, very hot and wild and very, and then all of a sudden the energy starts to wane. And in this part, you might just be holding each other or just kissing, or even you might pass out for a little while. And then all of a sudden you kind of come back and all of a sudden it comes up again. And so it comes and goes. And in those down times, that's when perhaps it's like, let's go have a coffee, you know? And then maybe it's like 6 hours later, maybe it's when you go to bed later at night, you pick up that beautiful flow again, right? But back to the whole, if you want to do it at the end, that's fine. But in the middle of that, you will explore other things. And that is where things become expansive. And it's not even for me to say, well, do this and do this, because it all depends on the people. It all depends on where each person is at in that moment, right? Maybe one person is actually feeling in a very quiet mood, and maybe it's all just very gentle caressing and flowing together. Or maybe you're super horny and you're just playing with all kinds of crazy stuff. But it doesn't matter. As long as that orgasm race isn't there, you will go places you've never gone before. It's very exciting. I'm going to stop there. I do recommend, if this is interesting to you, to definitely check out some of these books, to check out Tantric Intimacy, Divine Union, Tales from the Tinderverse. There's lots of fun tips and exercises in those. Hey, Dean. But yeah, if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. And thank you guys for being here. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm so glad you were here. And if you're interested in any of my online courses, definitely check out my website, katrinaboss.ca. And you'll find a lot of my videos here on YouTube talking about all of these topics, the masculine, feminine, tantra, things like that. Lots of great things you can check out. I haven't dated in 40 years, but it is interesting to hear about navigating the world these days. Honestly, it's really interesting, especially dating at this age. I'm 54, I think. 54. And there's an interesting joy in it. Sometimes there's a bit of anxiety because, we aren't our 20-year-old fit body self or something, but I think we had more inhibitions then than we even do now. But once we kind of get over that, we really enjoy the wisdom and the place that we're at. It's interesting meeting new people. It's interesting finding out about people and exploring other things. It's super, super fun, As long as we don't get all caught up in the feelings of rejection or feeling like we have to be popular or all that stuff, right? I wonder how young people today would interpret the masculine and feminine dynamics in the way you talk about them. Well, it's interesting because I talk to a lot of people who are in their 20s about all of this. And even I have a lot of friends and family in the LGBTQ community. And it goes right across the board. Masculine and feminine have nothing to do with gender. Masculine and feminine are about two universal magnetic energies that draw people together. And it doesn't matter what your gender is. And there's a lot of people who identify as asexual and they're not interested in that. And that's great. There's a lot of people who are heterosexual and aren't interested in that, right? They're just interested in a very happy life where they live side by side with someone, whether they ever have sex or not. I mean, there's lots of relationships out there. People who've been married for 40 years who haven't had sex in 20, you know? So that's cool. These teachings, the desire to have all of this dynamic masculine and feminine that I'm talking about, that's only if you're seeking a dynamic relationship, if you're seeking that kind of magnetism, chivalry, passion. Not everyone's seeking that, regardless of orientation, regardless of gender, regardless of anything. But if you're seeking it, then we get to play in the powerful dualities of masculine and feminine. And my last two talks were all about how to be masculine and how to be feminine in relationships, right? I love City of Angels, right? Oh, I highly recommend it. If it's a beautiful movie anyway, but by the time you get to the sex scene, you watch the sex scene and you will know how to have tantric sex. Like just do what they did. That's it. There's no tricks. There's no special positions. There's no anything. Just embrace what they do. That's all you have to do. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And we have more live stream talks next week. So I'd love if you could join me then. We'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for being here.